Hello and welcome to another episode of Gotta Run with Will. I am your guest host today, Timothy Clarke from the Personal Record Podcast. Today I'm joined by a very special guest. This is Rudy Garcia-Tolson. Rudy is a multi-time Paralympian, multi-time gold medalist, and the first ever above-the-knee double amputee to ever complete an Ironman. He's a very special person, and we're privileged to have him here with us today. So, Rudy, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. We're really looking forward to a great conversation. What's it like to have a gold medal slung around your neck at the Paralympics?
I got my first one back in 2004. I'm 16, and I would say that's a pretty surreal experience. Something that I dreamt of the night before, and of course, several years before training-wise. And then to finally have it happen was very cool. And my mom was up in the stands. She was crying. And to hear a national anthem was pretty epic. And then to see your flag in the middle with the two other flags, second and third. It's just, yeah, I guess undescribable feeling. But really, it was kind of a sense of like mission accomplished. Like we got it done. The results, which was the gold medal, was kind of unexpected. But that's what made it that much more sweeter, I would say. So yes, amazing feeling. And if you ask me where I have them now, I think all my medals are wrapped up in a little bandana and a little bag, and they're pretty beat up now, actually. 'Cause I do a lot of school visits. I do a lot of motivational speaking. I usually bring them out, let people wear them, let people hold them. So they're pretty, they're worn. But that's kind of the point.
If you're gonna have a gold medal, I think you have to show it off.
Yeah, I have to a little bit. Everybody has their preferences, but I like bringing them out, putting them on the kids, and let them experience what it's like to have a medal around your neck.
Sure. You had laid down the gauntlet pretty early in life. From a very young age, you had said you wanted to compete in the 2004 Olympics, which would eventually be your first.
Yeah.
Where did that motivation come from? Why did you have that inkling so young that you wanted to do that?
Sure. Well, for me, I didn't necessarily start off with, I want to go to the Paralympics and I want to do an Ironman. It was a little bit about just being able to prove the guy next to me wrong, being able to beat the other guy next to me who had two legs. It was just, I think it was about keeping up. My whole life I've always had doctors, people telling me that I would never accomplish too much. I would never walk, I would never run. Really anything to do with my legs was kind of out of the question. Around the time 1995, 96, I had my legs amputated. There wasn't too much technology out for double above knee amputees. And when you become an amputee, you learn different, languages around the prosthetics. And if you ask anybody who what the difference is, if you have your real knees and you're missing the foot, it's significantly easier to kind of continue down the path with living with prosthetics. And myself, I had my legs amputated through the knee. So I still have my kneecaps, but there's no knee joint there. So for me, it was, here's these stelts, basically what they gave me when I started with. And these were the basic insurance bought legs that my family can afford. And they were actually legs geared towards your older patients, your diabetic patients who were getting one leg amputated or both of them. So the durability of these legs were not very good, actually. I remember my first year with prosthetics, it was going back to the doctor at least twice a week to get them fixed, to get them, something was loose, something was broke, something wasn't feeling right. It was always something with the legs, and really that was kind of my first biggest challenge was growing up with a physical disability, going through 15 surgeries to try to fix my real legs. And then getting to the point where I was, basically grew up in a hospital, and I was kind of over the whole being in the hospital. And, I overhear the doctors talking about we might need to amputate. And for me, it was like a black and white decision. I said, let's cut these legs off. What's the big deal? It wasn't that deep for me. It was very simple. Cut my legs off, and I could get some different legs, or I would have to continue to stay in the hospital and potentially, stay in a wheelchair. And for me, it was a black and white decision. Let's cut these bad boys off. And my parents didn't want to cut my legs off when I was born, because they didn't want me to come back when I was, 20 or 30 and ask them why'd you cut my legs off. So when my parents heard me talking about, I was telling my grandma, I was telling everybody that the doctors were going to cut my legs off. It was obviously very emotional, but I think it made it that much easier for my parents to go through the procedure. And I would say, recovery after I had my legs amputated was, 2 or 3 months. I had a lot of stitches. It had healed well. I was ready to go. I wanted to move. And I remember the doctors sent me home after a few weeks in the hospital. They sent me home with these casts around my legs, similar to when you break your arm or leg. And the doctors, they told me to not walk on these because your legs are still healing and there's stitches. And I remember as soon as I got home, I lived in a trailer, and as soon as I got home, I was running up and down the trailer. I had to go back a week later because I made a hole in the little cast because I was just on them. And it was, for me, it felt like I was running on my knees. And so I felt like I was free. I was loose. I was going. And then a few weeks later, I finally got my first pair of prosthetic legs. What I remember most when I got my first pair of prosthetics was being able to stand up and kind of look at people in the same eye level. And then, of course, my first request was I want to be taller than my older brother because, hey, when you become a double amputee, you can be as tall as you want.
How do you make that decision? That's, how tall is too tall?
And that's kind of the question that my prosthetist was asking me. Well, how tall do you really want to go? Because I was
8 feet.
And honestly, I was in that mindset of, I can be as tall as I want. Well, can you make me taller? Make me taller.
I don't want to swim. I want to be in the NBA.
I just want to be an NBA. And that's kind of my mindset. And so I made myself a little bit taller each time I went back to the doctor. And that was kind of like that was his way of telling me you need to slow down because you can get a little too tall to the point where if you fall, it's a long way down.
It's a long way down. Yeah.
And then I remember going home with my new legs and being able to see what was on top of the kitchen counter and opening cabinets and those little things that I completely missed out of my whole life was finally there and available. And then around that same time, I got involved in swimming, and I really loved swimming because I was able to take my legs off. These legs that were 10 pounds, they were on my legs with belts, and they were very uncomfortable. They were very heavy. They broke a lot. And for me, when I jumped in the pool, it was like my freedom. I can move, I can swim like everybody else. And when I joined my first swim team, I remember all the kids, the able-bodied swim team, all the kids kind of referred to me as the boy with no legs. It's the boy with no legs, and that's who I became. And I really didn't like that title. It didn't sit well with me because I thought to myself, I'm a lot more than just a boy with no legs. I feel like I kind of got that little fire in me. And I made my first goal. My first goal, I remember telling my parents, I just want to beat a kid with legs. That's it.
You were a precocious kid. I mean, you're a 5-year-old with a birth defect in your legs, and you make the decision to have them amputated, which I can't imagine the kind of situation that must have been at 5 years old. To then go into your swim team and say, I want to start beating these kids. That I'm sure that's a fire that has stuck with you throughout adulthood.
I would say that's what's carried me through 4 Paralympics and an Ironman race. But it was at that age, being doubted, being looked down upon.
A chip on the shoulder is thought of as a bad thing. I'm looking at you and I'm thinking maybe it's not such a bad thing.
Not so bad. In the right situation, it kind of, like you said, it's fuel for the fire. And I remember I used to go back to swim practice every day. I worked pretty hard, and finally, about 6 months later, I was able to finally achieve that goal. I remember I went to a race. I did the 50 freestyle. I remember touching out the kid next to me. It didn't really matter if it was his first race or if he just learned how to swim. For me, it was about I beat a kid with legs. And I think that's where my initial drive to continue on to 4 Paralympics and do an Ironman really stems from. It's just having that will to show everyone around me that, I'm more than just a boy with no legs.
Sure. So how, along those lines, how do you define winning? Is winning, stretching out the guy in the stretch, in the last lap, touching somebody out? Is winning something more than that? Is it deeper? Do you have to be the first person? Do you have to have that gold medal around your neck to think you're a winner?
I think being a winner is a little different for everybody. For me, being a winner when I first started swimming was beating the kid next to me. It wasn't about becoming number one. It wasn't about winning races overall, but it was more about just beating the guy next to me. I was in swim races and running races coming in dead last. I was that guy. I remember I used to go to 1 mile fun runs after 5Ks or before 5Ks and 10Ks or half marathons. They would have these little kid fun runs. And I remember I did my first one in Mission in 1997. I was 8 years old and I did not have running prosthetics at the time. I only had my walking legs, but I still wanted to go out there and race. I did this 1 mile fun run. It was raining, and I ended up coming in literally dead last. And the anticipation is what kills you, because you're coming in the last quarter of a mile. There's no one behind you because you checked, and you see all the kids in front of you. Of course, there's a big gap between the last kid and you. But knowing that you're last is kind of a scary feeling, because you kind of go through the whole, everybody's just cheering you on because you're out here and you have 2 prosthetic legs, but you refuse to quit, and so you kind of get a little bit of the pity clap. I wanted to be treated just like everybody else, and nothing wrong with becoming last in a race. Someone's got to be last, but for me, it was continue to build that fire in me. For me, winning was not being last. So I think winning can be defined in many different ways. If you ask me a little later in my career, when I started going to the Paralympics, what winning was, it was winning that gold medal. And now if you ask me what winning is, I would say it's about building up the next generation of young kids who are in the same situation as you, who are experiencing the things that you went through, and being able to be that role model and that guy who says, look, I did all this, so you can do all this, if not more, or whatever you want to do. It's possible.
You are now working at Tailwind Endurance here in New York City. You're originally from California.
Yes.
You are also working now with New York Roadrunner.
Yes.
And developing their wheelchair training program.
Yes.
Which is geared toward, is it anybody in wheelchairs, or is it children specifically?
We are targeting the youth. New York Roadrunners has a program, the Rising New York Roadrunners, which is in a lot of the public schools around New York City. We want to inspire through running. And so we want to get to the kids young. We want to let them know that they need to be moving. They need to, running can translate into almost all the sports, So we just want to get kids moving. We want to get them active. And we believe that all kids should be active. So if we have some kids who are physically challenged, they should have the same opportunity as any other kid in the school. And so we have a wheelchair training program. We have 3 10-week programs where we meet every Saturday. And Roadrunners, we supply all the wheelchairs. We have about 20 push wheelchairs for racing, and then we supply the helmets and the equipment needed. So really, we get these kids out and we show them that just because you're in a wheelchair doesn't mean you can't run. We have these push chairs, and these guys are out there every weekend, and really, we're really building up their self-confidence, and we're building up their lives, because through sport we believe that that's kind of how a good way to get back into the game of life, or to get into the game of life. You really builds that confidence, and especially for these young kids who are looked at as different. They are different their whole lives, and they know that. These kids are very smart. They know when someone's treating them a little different, more than others. And really, these kids, a lot of them, they just want to be like everybody else. They just want to fit in. They just want to do what everybody else does. And so, my role is to kind of build that program and to go out and find more kids who will benefit from the opportunity of getting involved in sport.
So for an able-bodied person looking at, say, one of these kids, what do you suggest they do? Because I think with the best of intentions, they want to go in and help the kid out and try to. But like you said, the kid sees that and he sees it being treated differently.
Sure.
Is there what do you suggest people do to not have that happen?
It's a very tricky balance, and a lot of times people will feel like they cannot say certain things to physically challenged kids because they just feel awkward about it. And I think that's something that, like I said, it's tricky. But for me, I feel like I have a special way that I can talk to these kids, because I've been there and I've done that. So I know exactly how they're feeling and what they're thinking. For anybody else, it's really, again, it's hard. I know it feels like we're just beating on the bat, but you have to treat these kids like everybody else, and that means you cannot be soft on them. You gotta be tough on them, because that's really what they need. They need to be able to find that independence. And when they find independence through sport, that carries on through their everyday life. And mom and dad are not going to be there their whole lives to push them around. So when we get them out on the track and in their chairs, we treat them like as if we have a normal age group track team. They're out there, they're pushing, they're getting tired. We're pushing them even more. And so I think that's really the key around dealing with physically challenged kids, is just treating them a little tougher than usual, I would say.
Is that a big wake-up call for them? Do they not expect that?
I think a lot of these kids it is, because they're kind of they're being coddled by their family, which is again another challenging aspect. A lot of these families, they don't have the means to afford these high-end prosthetics or these high-end chairs. And I think that's why it's so important for organizations like New York Roadrunners, the Challenge Athletes Foundation, Achilles, to really push us challenge athletes, because it's about being able to educate these families who otherwise would have no idea that there's a foundation called the Challenge Athletes Foundation who will get their child what they need to get to the starting line, and then to joyfully watch them get to the finish line. So.
And I think it's no secret that most children these days don't get enough exercise, right?
Sure,
Is the problem worse for kids with disabilities?
The problem is much more worse for kids with physical disabilities. If you look at the statistics, I don't know the exact numbers, but I do know your whole disabled community in the United States, of that community, it's maybe less than 5% who are physically active. And
do they adapt to it really well? Do they respond to it, or does it take a little bit of like, come on, guys?
When you're a child, you love it. They adapt right away,
okay,
because they know that that's a way for them to have their freedom. And a lot of these kids just want to feel the air going against the wind going against their face, and to feel that sweat, and to feel that feeling of like they just pushed all day and their arms are tired. That's what these kids want. They just want to be out free. Now, when you have a physically challenged athlete who is new and fresh and just recently, was in an accident, it becomes very challenging, because the first thing they need to do is learn how to use prosthetics, and then being able to use and get the high-end, adaptive prosthetics to allow them to run is like a whole nother level. So pushing physical activity and pushing this physical activity for challenge athletes is very important, because it's a way of life.
Sure. You do a lot of talks, you give a lot of motivational speeches to schools and businesses around.
Yeah.
Do you find there's a difference in motivating kids versus adults, and maybe kids with disabilities versus adults with disabilities? Is there a big difference between the two?
I love talking with elementary kids, because a lot of these kids, they're just so inquisitive. They're so curious on why I have these prosthetics. And a lot of times when I'm around New York City, I wear shorts. I'm probably the only guy who wears shorts in New York City in the wintertime, which my legs don't get cold, so it's not too shabby. But really, I see a lot of the kids around New York City or wherever I'm at staring at my legs. And a lot of times, more than often, the parents will say, "Don't stare." And they'll try to get the kids' attention to something else, because they don't want to experience that awkward moment when the kid says, "Mommy, it's a robot," and I happen to hear it, or something like that. They don't want to go through that, because they're not sure how I'm going to react. Am I going to get offended? Am I going to embrace it? And 100% of the time, I embrace it, because I understand the importance of educating to these kids, even when it's at the store, even when it's at in the subways,
sure,
wherever it is. I'm that guy who takes my leg off in the subway to show that little kid, because he's never seen it. He thinks I'm a robot. So for me, educating to the youth is I feel like very, very important. And I'm not saying it's more important than trying to educate an adult, but as a movement of the physically challenged athletes, the Paralympics is a movement. The Challenge Athletes Foundation is a movement. We're around for 25 years. I'm not saying that before the Challenge Athletes Foundation there wasn't adaptive sports for adaptive athletes, but since the Challenge Athletes came around, it's really have changed the way we perceive challenge athletes. And the biggest example is, nowadays we have young 3, 4, 5-year-old kids who are running around on these running legs, and they have no idea what it's like to run with 2 real legs. And they're going to continue on, and they're going to break any world records. They're going to win all the gold medals. And it's amazing to say that we kind of started that movement, and it's a new movement, but it's really educating the kids. So in another 25 years, everybody's going to know what these are, and there's going to be no questions on whether if that person with 1 or 2 prosthetics can run a marathon or can do an Ironman or can whatever they want to do. It's just a challenge. I always say to people that the real disability is a negative attitude, and we all have a choice in the morning when we wake up. We put our shoes on, we go out the door, we go to work. Do I put my legs on? Do I go out and go to work? We all have those same choices. Some of these choices might be, more challenging for you or more challenging for me. So it's really a matter of perspective. But at the end of the day, we all have our same challenges, and it's really about the way we perceive things. And it's all happens here in the mind, as you know.
Sure. Why did you feel the need to give back, to get involved with the Challenge Athletes Foundation? Why did you feel the need? I mean, you're a pretty high-profile athlete. You could have just led by example. You could have just been the guy doing the Hawaii Ironman and everything else you've done, gold medals in the Paralympics, and just led that way. Why did you have to physically get involved with Challenge Athletes Foundation to really do some grassroots work with a lot of these kids?
Sure. If you would have asked me when I was younger, I would have said I would like to just kind of be on the sidelines and I would like to just do the sport and then call it a day and wipe my hands and disappear. When I was in high school, I was very uncomfortable with who I was. I used to wear pants all the time. I used to wear my hoodie. I would cringe when someone would say, "Hey, Rudy's gonna be on TV tonight. Everybody tune in." I didn't like it. I just wanted to really be normal in every way, even though it was absolutely impossible. Once someone becomes physically challenged, they need to embrace that. Otherwise, you will have a lot of demons kind of around that. And I had a few demons when I was younger. When I was going through high school, I wanted to be normal. I wanted to look normal. I wanted to be like my classmates. It really wasn't until I was 22, 23 years old that I finally understood that this is bigger than me. I cannot in a sense sacrifice my own wants for what potentially can happen with me. And so when after hearing for 20 years or 15, 20 years that you're an inspiration. You've changed my life. Ever since I was 8, 9 years old and I've had people coming up to me, and some people have been crying, just completely bawling, saying that because they see me, they decided to change their life or whatever the situation is. And as a young kid, you can't really process that. You think that they're just trying to make you feel good. And really, when you get a little bit older, you start to understand that, maybe all the thousands of people who said that mean something, and maybe this is something that the world potentially needs. I find myself humbled by it because this is something that I didn't ask for. This is something that's been put on me. And as I said, when I was younger, I didn't appreciate it, but now I'm at the point where I fully understand it, and I understand that there's people who need to see me out there racing. There's people who need this. There's kids who need to hear what I have to say, because the world needs to be inspired right now. And I think that people like myself. People like Sarah Reinertson, people like Scout Bassett, Blake Leeper, all these guys, we need to really push them out there because, when the world sees someone like myself or like one of my teammates, their little problems a lot of times disappear and kind of puts things in perspective. So I think now I love being in the role that I'm in with the Challenge Athletes Foundation, with the New York Roadrunners, doing work with Achilles, because the community and building up the education and the outreach is very important. And we're all playing our little role in something big, I think. So.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. It's all about purpose and what is your way. You've clearly found yours.
I found my passion. Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's right. Sir. That's right. In working with Challenge Athletes Foundation, you had developed the relationship with Robin Williams.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about your relationship with him, what he had done for you specifically, and then for the community in general? Sure.
So I first met Mr. Robin back in 1998 at the Malibu Triathlon, and he was doing a relay there. He was a cyclist. was a huge cyclist.
He's very prominent in the cycling community.
Yes,
you know, he's always showing up to events. He's always at the Tour de France, or was always at Tour de France.
Yes, he was there all the time, and he just loved getting on his bike and hammering out 60, 70 miles. For him, that was his freedom. And so I first met Robin in '98. In 1999, I believe, we did our first relay triathlon. We came together. It was me, Robin Williams, and Scott Tinley, Ironman world champion.
Fan's a legend.
Not
Legend
too
in the
shabby,
sport.
yes, sir. And he ended up doing the run. Robin did the bike. I did the swim. We named ourselves Team Braveheart, a motto that I live by, which is a brave heart is a powerful weapon. We came together for Team Braveheart. We did that race in San Diego in La Jolla at the San Diego Triathlon Challenge. And we continued to do that race 10 years in a row. So Robin Williams would come back every year. He would always put it on his calendar to be in San Diego with the Challenge Athletes Foundation, and I was that lucky kid that he was part of a team with. And you know, just so you guys understand, I mean, when I was young, Robin Williams was in all my favorite movies. I mean, Mrs. Doubtfire, Flubber, Jumanji. I mean, all these movies, Robin was the man. And it was different. It's something I never experienced, seeing this guy on the movies, and then going to these races and being able to have like a conversation like we're having. And you would think that a lot of the questions or a lot of the things that he would ask me were about my legs or about the sports that I do, or me asking him about the movies or certain scenes, were really where we connected the most was through video games. Video games. And Robin was a huge video game gamer. He loved playing video games. He loved that whole world, and that's something that as a young kid, I mean,
what was his game?
He loved Zelda. Of course, he named his daughter Zelda as well. He loved all the games. I remember one time I was able to go to his house, and he had every single system, every single game, and it was like a kid's dream, you know? But from there, we developed this really cool relationship where I would see him every year, and it was a lot of respect. I think for Robin, it was something that he really needed, to be around challenge athletes. You know, I think it gave him a different perspective on life. It kind of changed the tone a little bit for him, and I think that he needed that a lot. He had his challenges as well. Some, you know, maybe we couldn't see his challenges, but they were there. And when he was around us challenge athletes, you know, we wear our challenges on our sleeve, and so it was something for him. It just felt good to him. You know, over the years, through our relationship, you know, I remember when I was young, when I was 10, 11 years old, Robin would actually send me boxes of video games. I think Robin sent me my first PlayStation 1. I was the coolest kid on the block, and I had all the coolest games, and I still stay in touch with his family. I'm very good friends with his son, Cody, who is around my age, and believe it or not, Cody actually buys me video games now, so he's carrying on his dad's tradition, which is awesome.
I think you make your own luck. These opportunities weren't handed to you. You went out and you grabbed them, and you made the best out of them.
Yes.
What's next for you? How can we get in touch with Rudy? How can we find out more about you, what you're doing?
What's next for me? I'm going to be in Challenge Daytona here coming up next month. I'm excited to do another challenge race. I'm actually be doing a relay. I'll be doing the run, so that half Ironman distance. I'll be doing the run portion. And actually, one of my teammates is the CEO of NASCAR, so very excited about this. I hear he's a very, very strong cyclist.
Sure.
So I gotta anchor the team and not let them down. So I'm excited about that. And then I'm continuing on with Tailwind Endurance Triathlon Studio here in New York City. I'm doing private swim coaching lessons, and I also do morning classes there, Wednesdays and Fridays. So if you happen to find the weather's too cold and you need to ride your bike, come over to Tailwind. And then of course I'm going to continue on my work with the New York Roadrunners. So.
Rudy, thank you very much for joining us. This was an absolute pleasure. I would like to thank Will Sanchez and the Manhattan Neighborhood Network for hosting us here today. And for all of you out there running, be sure to check out Gotta Run with Will. Thank you very much for joining us.